Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Glendale workshop for the district plan. This is our sort of signature event, the kickoff. We're going to be hearing from Ken Greenberg with some of his observations and some inspiring words relative to where we go from here. My name is Reno Mostacci. I'm the Planning Commissioner for Niagara Region. Again, welcome. What I'd like to do is to introduce some of our design team that will be supporting us. In addition to Ken Greenberg, we're joined by my colleague, currently with the City of Calgary, Sonny Tomich. If you could please stand, Sonny. Jamie Springer with H&R&A Developments from New York City. Michael Schraga, Principal Designer with the Planning Partnership. Ron Palmer, facilitating a table also with the Planning Partnership. And Donna Hind, of course, is our lead facilitator. So thank you all for coming. What I'm going to do is pass around the mic so that we can all introduce ourselves and so that the people in the room know who you are. As you can see, the event is being live streamed, so if I could ask that you speak into the mic so that folks who may be watching from their office or at home have the benefit of knowing what's happening today. Thank you.
My name is Pat Busnello. I'm Manager of Development Planning with Niagara Region.
Robin Chubb, Urban Designer with the Planning Partnership.
Rick Wilson, Senior Planner at the Region, Development Services.
Craig Larmer, Director of Community and Development Services, Niagara-on-the-Lake.
Aaron Butler, Planner with the City of St. Catharines.
Ken Greenberg, Urban Designer, working with the Planning Partnership.
And my name is Khaldun Ahmad, Manager of Urban Design at Niagara Region.
I'm John Stewart, Senior Planner with the Niagara Escarpment Commission.
Ralph Schultz, Director of Facilities, Niagara College.
Pam Skinner, Vice President Corporate Services, Niagara College.
Eric Withers, Acting Manager of Planning with the Town of Niagara-on-the-Lake.
Michael Schraga, the Planning Partnership.
Reiner Hummel, Hummel Properties.
Raymond Tung, Planner with the Town of Niagara-on-the-Lake.
Mark Vilmer, SRM Architects.
Sonny Tomich, Citizens Urban Design from Calgary.
Jackie Gervais, Niagara Region Public Health.
Stephen Bedford, I'm a planning consultant working with White Oaks, and I guess some of the baggage I carry is I was planning director in Niagara-on-the-Lake until 2011.
My name is Amir Wakel from White Oaks Resort.
Marko Juricic, Brooklyn Contracting, here for Vrancor.
Darko Vranic from Vrancor.
John Bucker, the chair of the Sierra Club of Ontario.
Ken Schultens from the Niagara Region.
Christina Caniff with Caniff Properties.
Hi, Tom Villela. I'm the Special Projects Manager with the region. I'm the Project Manager for Glendale District Plan.
Jamie Springer with HR&A Advisors, Economic Consultant to the Planning Partnership.
Phil Lambert, Niagara Region Infrastructure Planning.
Kirsten McCauley, Niagara Region Planning.
Kelly Provost, Niagara Region Economic Development.
I'm Ron Palmer from the Planning Partnership.
I'm Vanessa Ackroyd. I'm a landscape architect and I work with the urban design team at Niagara Region.
Sean Sissons, Asset Administrator for Niagara Regional Housing.
Randy McDougall, Commander of Logistics and Planning, Niagara EMS.
Glenn Shields of the GSP Group.
David Morse for Pound Niagara Builders.
Jeffrey Vise, Manager Public Works, Town of Niagara-on-the-Lake.
Linda Morgan from the Homeowners Association of Niagara-on-the-Green.
Betty DeCero, Town Councilor, Niagara-on-the-Lake.
Todd Harrison, Commissioner of ERMS and Regional Treasurer.
Jack Thompson, Region of Niagara Transportation Services.
Good afternoon. I'm Carolyn Ryle. I'm the Director of Transportation for Niagara Region.
Lyle Gator, student with the Niagara Region.
Katie Young, student at Niagara Region.
Olivia Hughes, student at Niagara Region.
I'm Fabian Sarah. I'm a policy planning student here at the Niagara Region.
My name's Amy Shepard. I'm too old to be a student at Niagara Region. I'm a planner with IBI Group.
Thanks. And I'm Doug Giles, Director of Community and Long Range Planning at Niagara Region.
So thank you, everyone. I'm going to turn it over really quickly over to Donna Hind to kick it off. Again, thank you for taking the time out to attend and support this event. Quite a bit of work went to the planning of this, and a lot of behind-the-scenes organization. And I'd like to thank Tom and Kirsten for putting this together and working with Donna and her team on the logistical end. So I hope you have an enjoyable afternoon, and it's inspiring and leads to a great outcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Reno. Thank you, Reno. So we are really looking forward to the next couple of days. So this afternoon, you've been invited to help shape the vision and fundamental planning and urban design principles for the Glendale district. Each table, you'll be working with one of the members of our team. Then we have invited you to come back tomorrow afternoon following our team's working session in the morning, where we will pull together everything we've heard this afternoon and have on the table for your review and conversation some frameworks for design. So we'll be looking at mobility, public realm, and planning and urban design. Both evenings, we've invited the general public, the community, to drop in to review the work in progress. So whatever we've generated today will be on the tables up on the wall for them to review tonight and tomorrow evening. This morning we had a great bus tour of the area, and about probably half the people in the room joined us on that. So we had a good drive around all the corners of our 700-hectare study area. So it gave everybody a really good sense of the territory, the area that we're working with. And then we had a good just roundtable conversation, questions and answers. We had the first impressions from the members of the team reported out to the people that were on the bus tour. So it was a great way to start. So we wanted to kick off this afternoon's session with a presentation by Ken Greenberg, and he's going to talk about some of his initial observations about opportunities and challenges in the Glendale district. So I'd like to invite Ken up to the front of the room.
Thanks very much, Donna. Good afternoon, everybody. This is a rare opportunity, and I'm speaking on behalf of the whole team. I think we feel really privileged to have been invited to work through this with you. It's not very often that you get to look at a site which is, if you look at the urban area, 400 hectares. If you look at the entire study area, 700 hectares of land. It's about 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers. An area where great change is going to happen. And to get all of you together who have, either on the public side or the private side, some key interest in the outcome to reflect on that future is pretty significant. And I would just like to encourage you, when we actually start the workshop, to think of the funnel being wide open. There are no bad ideas this afternoon. I think we want to, don't hold back. Let's hear your thoughts. I think we're going to learn a lot from you as we start to think about what that future might be. To set the context for this, we are at a truly pivotal moment in terms of how we think about cities and how they evolve. And truly, you are at a crossroads. From mid-20th century to early in the 21st century, we thought about development being shaped primarily by the use of the private automobile. And the corollary to that was that land uses were separated and segregated in space. So people lived in some places, they worked in other places, they shopped in yet other places. Institutions were located on their own sites. Employment was separated from living. And that is the pattern that you're seeing on the ground now. The question is is that the one we want to continue? And that's kind of a rhetorical question, because in fact, the world is making a huge change away from that paradigm to thinking about a 21st century for cities, for urban areas, where we start to embrace other modes of getting around in addition to the automobile, alternatives, where we're mixing land uses, where we're doing a whole bunch of things differently. So we're going to ask you to think about 6 different themes, none of which are theoretical, all of which are happening now, and I'm going to give you examples of each of them. One of them is we're calling transformative infrastructure, a different way of thinking about the engineering foundation for our cities. Radical mix of uses, getting different human activities together in new configurations, fostering synergies. Increased density, obviously, using the land more resourcefully. Enhanced mobility by all modes. Connecting with green space. Public realm, connection to nature within the city, and your region is just a remarkable example of the opportunity to do that. And finally, what we're calling parking attrition. We got to the point where the actual physical space occupied by parking, whether it was in surface lots or in above-grade structures or in underground structures, was actually exceeding the amount of built space in buildings for many uses, and assuming that pretty much every adult was using a car for every trip as part of their daily lives, and that is changing rapidly. So think of all those 6 themes as we proceed. So this is the site as you find it today. These are some of the applications and plans that have come forward, and each one in isolation is absolutely a rational response to the current situation. If things don't change, and every landowner has to come forward in the current context with the regulatory framework that's in place, with the transportation infrastructure that's in place, with all of the expectations for planning, what we will get is a continuation of the piecemeal ad hoc development, highly based on auto dependence with those kinds of separations that I was talking about. In approaching how the shift could occur, how we might think about the future in a different way, we start from the fact that you have in this region some enormous inherent advantages, tremendous assets. So agriculture and viticulture in this region are world-class. You have become justifiably famous for that, attracting more and more attention, drawing people from an ever greater area who want to come and visit this region. You have a rich heritage, both a built heritage and a natural heritage. And these are enormous assets that we can draw on. And this Glendale district sits right in the middle of an ability to draw on all of these sources. You have these ingredients, which again, building on those 4 larger themes, are very powerful in thinking about the future. Niagara College, the emphasis on higher education, you have destination retail, you have green spaces in abundance all around you, you have great access by highway, but also, interestingly enough, the opportunity for a GO station and for other means of access to the site. And you have the beginnings of a residential community. So all of these are strengths that we want to try and weave together and expand on. So our task this afternoon and tomorrow is really to start to think about what a different kind of vision for this remarkable, strategically located site could be, and how do we take these 6 themes, how do we weave them together, not one at a time, but with the synergies that are released when you think of them all simultaneously? Where might that lead? So what does the paradigm shift look like? And I actually picked this photograph because this was the very first assignment I had in urban design. I was recruited by Mayor David Crombie in the city of Toronto at a point when the city had just prepared what was called the Central Area Plan. Prior to the Central Area Plan, downtown Toronto was considered to be a CBD, in the lingo of the time, a central business district, essentially for office uses. And virtually no one lived in downtown Toronto. So for any of you who visited Toronto lately, you can see the extent of the change. But the Central Area Plan was a pivotal moment, like the moment that you are facing right now for the Glendale district, where the city said, we want to make a change. And what you're seeing here is the area, you may recognize the St. Lawrence Market or the back of the Flatiron Building in Toronto. This was, in effect, a gigantic parking lot for the office buildings that were going up at King and Bay. And in fact, more and more buildings were coming down to expand that parking lot. The green space that you see behind the Flatiron Building had, just before this photograph was taken, been a parking lot too. So every available surface space was parking. And what the Central Area Plan proposed is, let's bring people to live in downtown. Let's make this a lived-in place. Let's put the emphasis on transit. There was actually a proposal to tear down the St. Lawrence Market because it was unused. This was a world that was heading in a completely different direction. And so the emphasis on heritage, on public transit, on walkability, all of those things were part and parcel of the Central Area Plan. And the Central Area Plan was based on the premise that for landowners to get the highest and best use of their land, they had to do mixed use. They had to bring in residential. Now, if you look at the fact that we now have 250,000 people living in downtown Toronto, and that number is going to double to 500,000 by 2041, and everybody's concerned about the wave of condo development and now increasingly rental development, the fact that developers didn't want to do that back at that time seems kind of interesting, but that is what was there then when I began. I thought, by the way, this was mission impossible. When I saw what that looked like, and it wasn't called the St. Lawrence area at the time, it was called East Downtown. Betty DeCero, who worked with me at the City of Toronto, will remember what this was like. This is what's there today. So there's not a single surface parking lot to be found. There are people in equal numbers living and working in this area. There are beautiful park spaces. There's extraordinary retail, restaurant, hospitality, all of the accoutrements of contemporary urban living. And this is, from an economic development standpoint, this is a highly performing area in terms of business taxes, property taxes, all of the ways, all of the metrics to measure economic success. So this is in the heart of the city. And this is a reworking of Berksea Park, famous fountains. Those Claude Cormier, the landscape architect from Montreal, was recently brought in to do a redo of this park, the dog fountain. How many of you have seen that? Okay, it's quite a draw, both for local people and for tourists. But it's really the daily life there which is so impressive and so significant for children, for families, for visitors. That's the kind of thing we want to create here in this Glendale district. So that's in the heart of the city. Now the same thing is happening in suburbia. This is Square One when it was created. This is before, in the 1980s, Sam McLaughlin famously built Square One, this huge regional mall in the middle of farmers' fields. You can see there's no development around it. Led by Mayor Hazel McCallion, and I worked with the mayor on what was called the Downtown 21 plan. Basically, this suburban site, once again surrounded by thousands of surface parking spaces, is being converted into an active, thriving downtown. It's being wired to transit with an LRT, which will come up Hurontario and circumnavigate the city center, bus rapid transit, but also, very importantly, a whole series of amenities, I would call them chess pieces, that have been deployed by the city in aid of making that synergistic mixed environment. So a central library, city hall, obviously, a civic center, YMCA, Living Arts Center, Sheridan College came in, which shares the parking with the mall. And all of those, you can see the shadows, tens of thousands of people living immediately around the center, and a plan which will take all the surface parking and turn it into urban blocks, which will house a mixture of office uses and different forms of residential, and increasingly not just condos, but also contemporary rental for a complete mix of the population. So these are some of the things that under Hazel McCallion's leadership came in, the new City Hall, the Living Arts Center, Sheridan College, and the square in front of City Hall. And what's interesting is Sheridan College, why did Sheridan College come there? Because I was involved in the group that persuaded them to make that decision. They were very close to closing the deal on a suburban site, a highway location where they could have had surface parking, and a much less expensive site. And they came into the city center because they could share the library, they could share the Y, they could share the Living Arts Center. And in fact, when they initially came in, they were going to build their own parking structures, and eventually decided it wasn't necessary because the combination of transit options that had come and the sharing of spaces with the mall meant that more and more of their students were not actually driving to the campus. So here's another example. This is a mall in Houston, and this is happening all across the US and Canada, where these single-purpose retail uses are actually being converted into mixed-use environments with great success for the owners. So this is what this looks like. It has attractive sidewalks and streets. People can walk from one thing to another. They can live there, they can work there, they can go to restaurants and cafes, they can do their grocery shopping, and they have access to transit. So that's one part of this. Now, if we take our 6 themes and we apply those paradigm shifts, how does this break down? Well, one of them, the first one, is transformative infrastructure. And you're in a really interesting moment when the intersection with the QEW is going to be transformed by the MTO. You're in the middle of an environmental assessment. We heard this morning at our tour that one of the objectives of the environmental assessment is to make this not exclusively about automobiles, but to design this facility in a way that is also going to support active transportation. In other words, getting across the QEW for people on foot and on bicycles, and make that comfortable and easy. But what it's also doing is it's taking a lot of the land that was used up in the form of the cloverleafs and making that available for urban development. In other words, the opportunity to get much closer to the intersection and make a much more urban solution. But really importantly, if you broaden out the objective of this, active transportation is part of it, how can we make this initiative by the MTO part of urban placemaking? If our goal is to create a there, someplace in this Glendale district that people are going to be attracted to, that they will want to come to, how can we take the removing of a barrier, the improving of transportation, and layer onto it other objectives which go to creating a very special place on the site? So this is what an environment dedicated entirely to moving automobiles looks like. Here's an example. This happens to be in Vancouver, Washington, in the US, of a land bridge, and there are examples of this in many, many places where the infrastructure actually becomes part of the landscape. There's a phenomenon now called landscape urbanism, which is very much based on taking civil engineering works that are required for functional purposes and treating them as part of the urban landscape and using them to shape places. We're not saying that literally this is something you could pick up and cut and paste here, but some version of getting across the QEW that would have, or versions, this may be in more than one place, that will have the qualities that would make that crossing not only functional, but really special and contribute to that notion of place. So here's another example from Seattle, the famous sculpture park, which actually treats a crossing to get to the Seattle waterfront, get across the rail corridor, and creates a major destination, a major feature in Seattle, weaving the park creation together with the bridges in order to create that special place. So as we look at the site together, I would encourage you to think about where are the best places for this to occur on this site? How could this occur? What do you want to connect? How could you make this something that has these kind of qualities? Secondly, the radical mix of uses. This is the kind of thing that's happening all across North America. This site where you can see this insertion of relatively new buildings it's in a university town. It was a former strip mall. And in place of the strip mall, we have 11 mixed-use buildings, 600 rental apartments, and 140,000 square feet of retail and office space. And very significantly, at the heart of this, a public square. And what that does is it gives you the critical mass of population concentrated in an area, not only to create a strong identity, but actually to develop the possibility, for example, for retail businesses to thrive because there are both people living and working there. So it becomes the proverbial 24/7 kind of destination. This is what that looks like on the ground. And there are any number, hundreds in fact, of such examples that are occurring across the continent now. Increased density. You are in this very interesting location with relationship to Old Town, to Queenston, to Niagara Falls, to St. David's, to Virgil, where this site can actually be a density carrier. And when we were talking about this morning, this could be a site that takes the pressure off some of the very significant historic settlements in the area, becomes in fact a density carrier. And if you relate this to the provincial places to grow, the growth plan of 2017, the fact that you have the potential for GO service to occur nearby, this is a rare opportunity to actually build at higher densities where you're not going to be disturbing existing neighborhoods that are in the immediate area and where we will actually benefit from that density. It's important when you think about this to just put the size of this site in perspective. You can see the urban area of 400 hectares in that 700 hectare study area. Compare that to Niagara-on-the-Lake Old Town, 23 hectares for the heart of the city, just to give you a sense of quite how big that is. Downtown St. Catharines, 125 hectares. Downtown Thorold, only 24 hectares. Downtown Niagara Falls, 60 hectares. So this is an enormous area that we're dealing with. Downtown Toronto is 1,500 hectares. So you are the study area is half the size of the entire downtown Toronto, the 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers roughly. Downtown Mississauga is only 260 hectares. Vaughan, 205. Markham Center is actually a close comparison at 415, and I'll show you an example of that in a moment. So this is downtown Markham. Markham made a really interesting decision compared to many of the other emerging urban centers in the 905. They did not allow a generation of malls or big box retail or power centers. They held the land knowing that they wanted to do urban development. And I was involved with a planning partnership working with York University when York was looking to create a secondary campus. We ran a competition in York Region, and all of those centers all competed. And Markham actually had all of the assets, but they had not spoiled their opportunity. And so this site, this 415 hectares, is roughly the size of the urban area that you're talking about. It has a GO station, it has a civic center, it has a district energy location, it has a YMCA, it has a bunch of those chess pieces that the decision that York made could play off to come and create a campus here, and you already have the campus. So this is the plan starting to fill in. You can also see how they are maximizing the opportunity of the green space in the plan. They're creating along this water course the Rouge Valley Greenway, which will run right through the heart of the city with green fingers that extend into the urban area. And here's some of the development that's beginning to occur at different scales. And once again, you can see that it's intense, that it's walkable, that it's mixed, that it has all those characteristics of the paradigm shift. And yet it's using very familiar building typologies. In this case, a combination of stacked townhouses, mid-rise apartment buildings. On the ground, in a new place, in a brand new place, it starts to have those characteristics that we value so much in historic settings, of walkability, of amenity, of people living and working in close proximity, doing their shopping in the same areas, and so on. So let's look at the next theme, enhanced mobility. You are positioned in a really interesting region. For those who wanted to fly here from Billy Bishop, it's a 12-minute flight. Extraordinary. It's a bit pricey, but that would enable somebody who wanted to come here and enjoy the extraordinary amenity that you have to get here in 12 minutes. But what's also interesting is with the drive is pretty horrible. I have to say, I came this morning very early and I was watching all the traffic trying to go the other way, which was pretty horrendous, but it was quite comfortable driving here again in a kind of contraflow against the rush hour. But once you have the opportunity for rail service, for GO service, that can become a very comfortable and enjoyable ride. And when you get here, you don't need to have a car. You're right in the middle of a wonderful region with all of these amenities within close proximity. You're 13 kilometers from Niagara-on-the-Lake, Old Town, 10 kilometers from Niagara Falls, right next to downtown St. Catharines, and so on. And so the idea that this could be a gateway site where people can come, whether they come by car or come by GO train, and actually shift to other modes, either shuttles or cycling, is very viable in this region to get around and actually enjoy the amenities that the region provides. I mentioned this morning that my wife and I, for many years, we've been coming down and cycling, and I think I've cycled on pretty much all these trails. The length of the Welland Canal, along the Niagara River, visiting various vineyards through the area. The Bruce Trail comes right beside our site, actually touches it. So the opportunity to explore nature, to explore these trails, to take advantage of the fact that you have this very mild climate, you have a flat topography that makes cycling a pleasure, you have a lot of small roads when you're not actually on a designated trail that are very comfortable to cycle on. This is a big deal. This kind of ecotourism, agritourism is something that people are really interested in nowadays. And this is your website that actually guides people. It could be much better. I think you could really improve on the ability to find your way onto these trails and the amenities that they offer. By the way, the very best website that I have ever encountered for that kind of tourism, believe it or not, is the province of Newfoundland. Check out their website and you have access to everything: food, lodging, amenities, trails, and so on, all extremely easy to find in one place. The Welland Canal, I consider to be a World Heritage Resource from the standpoint of industrial archaeology, from just pure interest. As I mentioned, I biked the length of the canal, the locks. It is extremely interesting, quite special. And I think it's a resource which is right on the edge of the site that we're looking at. The visitor center is just on the other side of the canal from where we are here in Glendale. I think this is something that an asset that we could make much more of, and more about that in a moment. So here's the canal, that visitor center, the seaway property on this side of the canal, that enormous land reserve. A number of us have been speculating, and I'd like you to talk about it and think about it, whether that could become a great seaway park that could actually celebrate that body of water that is off the canal, that's used for controlling the level of the canal, and the very, very large, it's about 30 hectares of natural area surrounding the canal. And we've been talking already this morning a lot about how do you have something here at this gateway which is a draw. We know that people go to Niagara-on-the-Lake or for the falls for respectively an extraordinary natural feature or a cultural heritage feature. What could be the feature or features here that would draw people? And I think the seaway, the canal, could play a great role if exploited properly and if developed in a park setting to contribute to that kind of special quality of place. These are the Bruce Trail connections. Again, it's tantalizingly close, just to the south of the study area. And that puts you into this regional, international UNESCO biosphere reserve all the way up to Tobermory from the falls. And so increasingly this kind of exploration of the country, people taking advantage of these assets like the Bruce Trail will become significant, quite apart from the sheer beauty of, for example, the college right up against the beautiful landform which is adjacent to it. So here is the escarpment and all of the features that have been identified, and you can see the density of those features that are right next to the study area. How do you create a kind of not only wayfinding, but also the physical means within the area to take advantage of those assets and weave them into a pattern which is highly accessible? And then, of course, there's the wine country. You are so extraordinarily positioned for people who are enjoying that feature. And by the way, none of these things are mutually exclusive. People will come to the region, as you know, to enjoy all of these things as part of their visit, both people quite locally, but also people coming internationally. and the quality of the landscape, of the natural landscape in the area, as an extraordinary draw. So this is an image from the Napa Valley in California, who in some ways are your peers in terms of exploiting a region of viticulture. And I want you to focus on one aspect of this, which is the sharp contrast between the urban and the vineyards, the agriculture. That ability to be in the urban and then to walk a few minutes and find yourself in the vineyards or in a natural area is an enormous asset. For those of us who know European villages, I actually wanted to show an image of a village that I really like very much in southern Italy, in Basilicata. All those beautiful Italian hill towns, and I was told, no, you have to show a North American example. It's too strange, too different. But it's that quality that I'm sure many of us have experienced of being in a place which is intensely urbane, and then literally having this juxtaposition. There's something so deeply satisfying about that. And I think we have the opportunity here in terms of how we frame the urban area and how we don't let it be frittered away at the edges. We'll come to questions after. But how we really enhance that contrast to take advantage of the relationship. So connecting with green space is another absolutely key theme. And the combination of green spaces that occur within the district and on the edges of the district, the conservation area, the area along the Welland Canal, and weaving a green network through this area so that you can move through the entire area, not just in your car on a road, but on a system of interconnected trails. And for those of you who are visiting cities like Toronto recently, what's happening in our city is the combination of the ravines, the hydro corridors, the cycling trails are creating an entire comprehensive green network. So it's possible to move around the entire city on bike or inline skating or however you want to do that, jogging, walking, and enjoy that exposure to nature. There's a new trail, a 16.5-kilometer trail that was just announced called the Meadowway, which is going to connect from the Don Valley near the Science Center all the way to the Rouge National Park. And that will go through 24 different neighborhoods and give people an opportunity to experience the city that way. What are the equivalents here that we can find? What are those green traces when we actually sit down to look at the map to find those desire lines in using existing green spaces or enhancing ones that are currently available and could be developed to form those green networks. Again, the fact that you're sitting in this environment, which is so special and so beautiful. Parking attrition. I am working on a fascinating project now called Project Sidewalk in Toronto with Google, an affiliate of Alphabet. And of course, we're looking at this mobility shift. I don't think there's any question that within a relatively short period of time, we're going to see automated vehicles. One of the main things that automated vehicles will do is to remove the need for almost all parking. The vehicles will be fleets. You'll be able to call them up. They don't have to sit, as they currently do, 90% of the time in storage, either in surface lots or in parking spaces. It's going to be a phenomenal shift in the way we live. And so thinking about parking as a use which is going to change over the lifetime of this project, of this area being developed, I think opens up all kinds of interesting opportunities. This is an example, yet another example of that attrition of parking. This was Don Mills, a great visionary, early modernist suburb on the outskirts of Toronto, developed by E.P. Taylor. And you can see the mall with all its surface parking lots, and there you see what has replaced that, which is the shops at Don Mills, which is a series of buildings that have actually occupied the parking spaces, but even more significantly, the ability to create these wonderful public spaces in the heart of that area. And then the next step is to actually get people living there. So this is starting to happen. And so this evolution, this transformation from what was a single purpose type of use based entirely on this vast amount of space devoted to parking, turning into a mixed use, very synergistic kind of community. So those 6 themes, none of them are theoretical. All of them are happening very actively as we sit here this afternoon. They're happening around us. The great opportunity with an area like this is the slate is so clean, so open. There are constraints, there are opportunities for sure, there are things underway, but the ability to shape this place is absolutely extraordinary. So I'd like you to be thinking about those and other ideas as we go through, and let's see if we put all of our creative thoughts together, what we come up with this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Before we start on the table group discussions, are there a few questions of clarification? Yep.
Yes, the example of the Napa Valley I see is more of a warning than as a positive thing, because I think one of the strengths of the rural landscape around here is that you have both agriculture and natural areas around Glendale. And Napa Valley is, in contrast, is a sort of pure, sort of dangerously sterile, agricultural dominated landscape. And I think we're sort of superior here, the green belt around Niagara-on-the-Lake to the Napa Valley in that regard.
So point taken. I was simply using that to illustrate one aspect, which was the restraint in terms of creating an urban edge adjacent to the vineyards and to agricultural lands, not looking at all of the habitat considerations in the area. So absolutely, we have a great advantage here in terms of dealing with not only with the agriculture, but also the natural areas in a more comprehensive way.
Another question in the back.
Thank you. Just as a matter of clarification, you spoke about the QEW, the canal, and showed a wonderful picture of the Skyway, which isn't all that wonderful. And as I understand it, the MTO is currently working on a plan to twin the Skyway. In the process of this redevelopment and seeing how significant it potentially will be, has there been any thought given or discussions with the MTO in eliminating the Skyway and going underneath the canal instead with the tunnel? There's significant land area there because the Skyway in and of itself creates a negative, in my opinion. No different than the Burlington Skyway has virtually destroyed the waterfront of Hamilton. There may be an opportunity here to rethink the twinning of the Skyway and coming up with a better solution.
Do we still have somebody from the MTO here? I mean, it's a powerful idea. I really don't know if it has been considered, but by all means, let's bring it up. I will use your question to raise another, perhaps slightly less radical idea, which is to take these massive infrastructure undertakings and use them to accomplish other goals by getting a budget to come out of them to address other issues. So the example I'll give you is when the highway bridges over the Humber for the Gardiner Expressway were widened, David Crombie, who was then mayor, forced the MTO at that time to build a beautiful pedestrian cycle bridge over the Humber as part of the mitigation for the construction of that facility. So I think when you have these huge undertakings, it's absolutely appropriate to think of what are the things that can be achieved in combination with, in addition to thinking of the kind of radical alternatives that you're mentioning.
Any other questions before we get started? Just one last question.
I just want to say that is an exciting point you mentioned, and I believe that one thing we could maybe look at, I believe the long-term maintenance costs of a tunnel are less than of a facility like the Skyway. Could free up a lot of public money that could be used for other things, possibly. Could enhance the area.
Okay, we're going to now start with the table group conversation. So we have 5 tables set up. Ken is up at the front here, Jamie Springer here, Sunny here, Michael Schraga here, and Ron Palmer in the back. The focus of today's conversations are to start to think about an overarching vision statement for the Glendale Niagara District and to think about the fundamental principles that should form the foundation of any planning and urban design in this 700-hectare district. So you can use a combination of tracing paper if you want to diagram it, or flip chart paper if you want to write notes. But this is the raw input that the team will use at tomorrow morning's working session, the team's working session, when they cobble together some physical design frameworks for you to review tomorrow. So if you're not at one of the 5 tables and you want to participate in the conversations, come up and take a chair and pull up at one of these 5 sessions. It's 2:00 now. We're going to have a report out probably in about an hour and a half, because I think I want the whole room to hear what each table group has come up with. So let's just get started and we'll see where we are in about an hour and a half. In an hour and a half is a statement that your group wants to put forward as a vision statement to guide development in the whole 700-hectare area, and then design principles. So principles with respect to planning, public realm, mobility. Can I get everybody's attention? It's just about 3:30. And I had mentioned that we were going to do a bit of a report out before we end day one of the workshop. And so what I'd like to do now is we're going to go from table group to table group. We've got 5 groups, and I'll call on one representative from each table group to speak to the product of this afternoon's visioning session. If you remember, I had asked each group to think about an overarching vision statement and some fundamental principles that should be used to direct the design exercise of the team tomorrow morning. So the first team that I have pinned up here is Sunny's group. So if somebody wants to come up and speak to the diagram that's pinned up. And if I can ask you to come and stand more or less in this position. And if anybody wants to stand up and get closer or stay where you are.
So really, I'm the mouthpiece for Sunny's wonderful work and our group's ideas. So the focus of our group is clearly creating two cores for the Glendale district, centered on this new, incredibly beautiful, and not just a regular MTO interchange. So building a core around the land that is now available with the outlet mall, and the land that's being discussed now for higher intensity residential development, so that you've got an area that will be high intensity development based surrounding the interchange. And the idea is to link the whole area so that there you are. We had our health person here, so we're all bike fit and we're all walkers.
It's all 500 meters radius, which is ideal for biking and
So we see the college as a significant integrated part of this whole core. Then we talked about the residential on the periphery being still higher density than you would normally think of, but it fits into what we're talking about, into the intensity. And then this area here we see as a more difficult piece. It's already light industrial. It's going to take time for this to transition to any other uses, but again, mixed use and mid-rise residential. The two areas here and here were thought of as trying to as an opportunity to take advantage of the continuing opportunity to take advantage of the QEW and perhaps mixed use, perhaps more traditional employment or office that would take advantage of the QEW. There you go. And so one of the other points was maintaining the views of Niagara-on-the-Lake from Queenston Street. So the residential that's here now, going to take time for that to evolve into something further. And so there's opportunities for redevelopment of this in the future to development that will take advantage of the views of the vineyards. This area here, we talked about connecting with the escarpment and the Bruce Trail and creating an eco park as much as you can in dealing with the Seaway people, but looking at opportunities to create an attraction to this area, as well as an opportunity to move through the area from an environmental perspective. Is that it? Wildlife, yeah. Oh, what? Yes. See all these guys? They're bunnies, kind of going from the wildlife area through the eco park and then into the agricultural area to the north. I think.
Talked about that. What's the name of that trail on top?
Bruce Trail.
The street over there.
Oh, Queenston, yeah. Queenston.
It's a fantastic opportunity for them, a more scenic promenade, for walking, biking.
Yeah. There was a vote for moving the the bicycle trail from York Road to Queenston, so that you wouldn't get run over.
And Southern, I think, also historic.
Yes. Yeah. The view, the walk from Queenston through the Bruce Trail is an opportunity, and then back in here and then across the Bruce Trail is an opportunity that they wanted to take advantage of. But the real key is pedestrian, active transportation, high intensity around the core, but taking advantage of high quality architecture and green space in order to
On both sides.
exactly. We okay? Did I miss anything? We good?
Any questions, clarification of Sunny's diagram? Okay, thank you. So we'll just take a moment and take this down. Yep. And I'm going to get Ron's table, whoever wants to speak to the vision and principles. Stand more or less in that.
Okay. Okay, so we may not have
a little, please.
Sorry?
Just tighten up a little, please. Thank you.
So we may not have actually created a vision statement per se, but we came across some good principles that actually lead into our vision, which is a little all over the place here. But basically, we were looking at making the region a successful and livable place, and I mean the district. So maybe I'll focus in on our principles here for a second, because that really sort of pulls out of our vision words that we were looking at. So what we want to see in this area are really beautiful, connected neighborhoods with parks and open space that are sustainable and resilient, that include community facilities, commercial and restaurants. So in order for this to be a good place, we need it to make a place that people don't just drive through, but that they drive or come to, that they can live there, they can do all of their everyday lives there. There's access to increased density of commercial and residential places, a mix of typologies, so not just a heritage looking type of space, not just a modern looking space, but a real a blend of the best of both worlds. Accessible and affordable. Again, we want to see convenience and service commercial and finer street networks that'll make it more approachable from a pedestrian point of view. Again, we're looking for complete streets, tree-lined roads, complementary architecture. We kind of focused on the idea of the place of the district as a hub, which is kind of why we're spoked out from this wheel here. And one of the main things I think might be really successful here, or our table thought, was a centralized farmers market. It's central to the region. That's why our EMS is located there. It's easy to get to every part of our region from that point. And like we've noted at the beginning, one of our major industries is agriculture and viticulture. So why not bring that back to this hub sort of idea? Really, I think, did I miss anything? We kind of just brainstormed a bunch of stuff and put it on, but I think most of our idea is kind of like a hub. So, any questions? No? All right.
Okay, thank you. Let me go over to
closer, but not. Okay. Oh. Okay, so we have, I think we got it down to about 6 big ideas for this area. The first one is this idea of utilizing the resource of the canal and the seaway and kind of developing this area as like a major recreation seaway park, really on both sides of the canal. Potentially with a connection on the west side in St. Catharines to the Welland Canals Museum and the City of St. Catharines Museum. Potentially an expansion of the visitor center in this area. Lake and canal cruises up and down the canal, connecting different parts of Niagara to each other. Even both Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, Toronto to Buffalo, even Cleveland. Marinas here, the opportunity for entertainment venues, concert venues, international geopark idea has been brought up recently at the region, and connecting really from here, connecting all of the natural features within the district to each other. We have the 6 Mile Creek system, the east and west branches, connecting to the canal, to the escarpment, potentially part of the stormwater management strategy for the area, utilizing the creeks, the Bruce Trail, and up and down the seaway lands. We latched on to this idea of building upon like the efficiencies around the interchange and some of the excess urban lands that are going to become available there for development. So this northeast quadrant we see as really opening up for urban development at a pretty intense scale. The northwest quadrant would be probably an expansion of the Niagara College campus. The northeast quadrant, the Niagara College on the northeast, White Oaks on the southwest and southeast, and on the northeast, kind of south of this tributary, some other potential development lands as well, and connecting those 4 quadrants. So a north-south connection at Airport Road coming down to Taylor here. This kind of spine we see as a critical connection from the CNR lands, the potential GO train station in the future, to the airport, and this district becoming like a major transit station area, a major hub. The other connection across the QEW would be this extension of Glendale Avenue to York Road, and potentially some secondary connections across the 4 quadrants as well. The area we would see as taking on quite a bit of growth in these new development areas in the quadrant. This existing plan of subdivision, we think could be increased in terms of density. We threw around the number of 15,000 people and jobs within the district. There's lots of other potential development sites on the north side of the district as well. Don't want to miss anything here. In terms of land uses, we think it's critical to have a lot of course, local serving uses, schools, daycares, things that can serve a population, but also uses that serve the surrounding tourism sector and the hospitality sector. And again, the word hub was thrown around, but this area being a hub for those kinds of uses, and people staying here and dispersing out into the the various tourism-related sectors. I think that's everything. Oh, we did have a couple of names as well that were thrown around. Niagara Landing, Glendale Crossing. Ken came up with Crossroads, but we told him that one's already taken up in Virgil. But we haven't quite formed a vision statement yet, but we're working on pulling those big ideas together.
Can I just add one thing? I mean, it was interesting that the first group, Sonny's group, came up with a similar notion about the intersection. And normally I would be dead against second-level pedestrian connections, but there's something really enticing about the idea of taking advantage of the surplus land that's released by getting rid of the cloverleaf on all four quadrants and allowing the college, White Rock, a pretty extensive area on this side and another area on the northeast side to actually become something very dense, a signature architectural piece composed of four elements, which as you're traveling on the QEW would be a really exceptional landmark, and to develop these second-level pedestrian connections that are really generous, that could be either quite literally public over the rights of way of the roads. They could be POPs, they could be built by the developers, and then very dense development related to residential, office, hospitality, hotels, a whole set of uses that would be kind of the heart and soul. And that wired to this ecological park could create two really powerful, distinctive things that would be different from anything else in the entire region. In order to pull that off, that's almost at the level of an international architectural competition to get that right. It's not just doing ordinary buildings. It would require something really special. It would require coordination between public and private and the MTO, and everyone would have to be involved in that. But I think it's a very compelling idea. And if you don't do that, if you kind of stay away from that, it's very hard to create that heart that we were talking about earlier in the area. So leave it at that, but it is interesting that we came to such a similar notion.
I'm just going to do the vision statement.
Yeah, and then I'll talk about it.
So we came up with a vision statement and wrote it out. I didn't write it, so I'll do my best here. So Glendale will be a community for people of all ages, lifestyles, and abilities, a place to live, work, play, learn, and grow. It will be sensitive to context, providing transition between urban, rural, and natural environments. It will have a mobility-first approach comprised of a robust internal and intra-municipal transit system that is connected to the GO train. The community will build on the existing open space system to create a well-connected network of open space, trails, and walkways.
Pretty legible. Thank you. So we went through actually a whole series of points, and what John just read was sort of a distillation of those points that we thought merited a vision status. And then the remainder points we identified as being key principles for working up sort of a conceptual approach later on. So just going through and then the principles we also broke down based on whether they were a planning principle, mobility principle, or a public realm principle. So in no particular order, we've identified what we think are the planning, mobility, and public realm principles. But I'm just going to read them in the order that we came up with them. So one member of our group referenced the well and canal lands on the west side, and thought of them as having the potential of being a Tanglewood type of environment, a cultural center that would attract people from all over the world and be a major destination in its own right. We also spoke about the need to be sensitive and responsive to context, which is borne out in the vision statement, that we have to make sure that we protect key view sheds, and also make sure that development, whatever development, makes that transition between urban to rural to natural. We spoke about making the whole development area more walkable, and also looking at leveraging the natural system, particularly as it is disconnected on one side of the QEW with the other, to look at the ways to bridge that connectivity to make it a much more pedestrian-friendly or cycling-friendly environment. Other principles we looked at were making sure that there are neighborhood schools within walking distance of development, of communities, maintaining view corridors, as I mentioned, and also, as I mentioned, providing that transition between different densities and types of environs. Also looking at ensuring that there's a transition between an automotive culture and future transit type of culture, because it doesn't exist right now, but we're going to have to figure out a way to bridge that gap. Making mobility a priority, and also providing for extra wide road right-of-ways, not knowing what capacity is coming in the future or what uses. We want to ensure that we accommodate all types of movement, whether it be pedestrian, cyclists, or vehicles, or transit. And so that came out through as well when we talked about providing for transitional forms of mobility. Whatever development happens, GO train transit, specifically train transit, has to be a significant factor as far as the success of any future development. We also looked at attracting entrepreneurial or niche type businesses, making sure that there is an investment environment conducive to that. Affordability was a big issue, making sure that we can accommodate all ranges of homeowners or home renters, and making this internationally recognized place that foreign students acting as ambassadors would take forth to wherever they came from when they return home, so that they could also promote the area. We spoke about improving connectivity on both sides of the QEW, and making sure that it wasn't just across the QEW, but also throughout the Niagara region. And our final page. I think this spoke to what Ken was talking about, and also Sunny, but the importance of connecting both sides at the heart of this Glendale community, connecting both sides of the QEW. Otherwise, you're looking at a two-node type of community on either side. I think we spoke to that. And I think, yeah, that's essentially it. Okay.
Last one.
whatever north is up. Yeah, yeah, okay.
No, I'll have to read sideways.
Okay, we had a lot of good discussion, similar things we've heard today so far. So I'm only going to touch on some of the new and interesting things we came up with. So we had Donna at our table, so she made sure we actually did a vision. It's a live-work destination building on the region's strengths by integrating a vibrant town center with entertainment and expanded college supporting innovation, employment with active transportation and connectivity. So we talked a lot about how we're going to be able to connect these two areas with the highway separating it and taking advantage of the MTO investment of the diverging diamond. Transportation came up as a huge item in connectivity, having public realm, having an area for people that would want to be incorporating the tourism piece. We've heard a lot about how do you take advantage of your Welland Canal active transportation pathway, these areas, and then tie it back into the community, cycling, trying to create a separate identity. And I believe, Ken, you referred to it as a there. So what is Glendale's there going to be? And we had a lot of different ideas, but I'm not sure we landed on anything. But talked about definitely some intensification, some employment uses, and trying to make all of these pieces connected.
Yeah, just maybe add just a couple things. One is I think we were sort of gravitating around this notion. A lot of what we talked about was building on what's already there and existing strengths, so that the outlet mall eventually becomes a kind of a core town center with a residential buildup below it and to the south and the west, and that can become a more vibrant area with a mix of uses and a mix of densities and entertainment. The other thing I thought was really interesting that the group talked about was the sort of how to build a kind of sustainable center of employment activity, really leveraging a growth in the college and all the innovation that's occurring there, a sort of a trade, emerging trade school around some of the regional economic drivers. And then also, maybe not necessarily questioning all of the employment activity that's happening to the north, in fact, finding other ways to integrate it. And one thing I learned is that, I guess in the secondary plan, there's a concept of extending Glendale Avenue across the QEW as well, so that you might create a kind of connected employment hub on the eastern section. And I think that brings us towards not just the importance of this one connection across the QEW, but multiple connections, generating activation and connectivity of employment uses over here, sort of residential, retail, entertainment uses over here.
That is the completion of the report out from the 5 groups. So now what happens? We're finished early, which is never a bad thing. What's going to happen in the morning is that the design team's going to get together and look at the product from the 5 tables. And they're going to, I'm supposed to stand here. They're going to synthesize what we gathered today and come up with some design frameworks that we'll put on the table for review with this group again. And so what typically happens is we'll have a design framework that isolates public realm, that maybe talks about mobility, and then a third one about urban design and planning. So there'll probably be a couple of layers of a plan that we want to go over with everyone at tomorrow afternoon session. I think we're on in the same room at 1:30 tomorrow, 1:30 to 5-ish. We'll be sharing all of this work with the public when they come in between 6 and 8. We're also going to give the same presentation that Ken gave this afternoon, and then we'll have an opportunity for conversations with the public again tonight. Anybody have any questions in closing? No? Oh, 1 instead of 1:30? Okay. The agenda, sorry, I had to move off my spot. The agenda is showing 1:30, but 1 o'clock now, from 1 to 5, and the morning was identified for the team's working session, but if people want to drop in and see what we're doing, you're more than welcome to come in casually, but it's not required. So Tom, you're saying 1, not 1:30?
Does the double sheet say 1:30?
Yes.
1:30.
Sorry. Reno. So we have another workshop in the work program that's, I think we had targeted the middle of August to come back. So tomorrow's product was a kind of first cut at the frameworks, and I think the August session will be the final emerging preferred vision.
Sorry, there seems to be a conflict in time. Can you
1:30. 1:30. All right, we're good. So we'll see everybody tomorrow at 1:30.